Thomas Jipping, Deputy Director of the Edwin Meese Center for Legal and Judicial Studies, Senior Legal Fellow at Heritage, joins me. Thomas, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
There are so many ways we can tackle this, Thomas, but I want to start from the simpler perspective, the understanding of what court packing really means. And you write about this, you talk about this, you come on this show and talk about it, but how it would affect the other two, quote, co-equal branches of government.
Well, that's the important thing, is that people hear the phrase court packing, they think it only involves the appointment of a few judges to one branch of government, but it's far, far bigger than that. The phrase comes from the last time that a president wanted to do this. You referred to it when Franklin Roosevelt pushed legislation to increase the number of justices on the Supreme Court. This isn't about filling vacancies as they happen. President Trump did that this year. Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. He filled the vacancy. This is about creating new vacancies so that a president can put ideological justices on the Supreme Court. Franklin Roosevelt tried to do it in the 1930s, and his own party rejected it. The Congress was overwhelmingly Democratic, and even then it was Democrats who said, this would amount to kind of a hostile takeover of the judicial branch. You don't change the structure of the institution itself just because you want to get your way. You have patience and fill vacancies as they come along, but you don't try to take over and make the judiciary essentially an extension of the executive branch, and that's what this would do. And so, we've been around this block once before. Democrats responded to it correctly in the 1930s. We want the judiciary to be independent of the political branches, not dependent, and that's what the threats today to try to do this again amount to. It would also change the Senate. In order to change the number of judges on the Supreme Court, you'd have to pass legislation. Well, of course, Republicans in the Senate would filibuster to prevent that legislation from passing, to prevent destroying the judicial branch. So Democrats say, well, if we win those two Georgia Senate races and can claim the majority in the Senate, we'll just abolish the filibuster altogether so we can ram this through and get our way. Well, the filibuster's been part of the way the Senate does business for 200 years. So they would not only change the judicial branch in order to appoint political judges, but they'd also have to change the Senate forever, because once this fundamental way that the Senate operates is changed, you'll never get it back. And so they would end up changing both the legislative and the judicial branches fundamentally from the way they were designed by America's founders for some short-term political gains.
I hear all of that. And Thomas, back then, in FDR's time, you had obviously, Democrats in opposition. You had Judge John Knox, who was by most accounts on his way to becoming a Supreme Court justice, the Democrat who stepped up and said this cannot stand, and he stood against FDR, who was a friend. Today, though, we have a different Democrat Party, leadership Democrat Party, and a heavily progressive, some outwardly and publicly socialist members of that party who control a lot of the base and are driving it. To me, that's important, because back then there could be disagreement and debate more so. Today, it's about outcome. And this is a different environment. So I don't think the same respect for the co-equal branches exists, but the drive for control is overwhelming that.
I think you're absolutely right. There was some principle involved back in the 1930s. Sure, FDR had a legislative program. He wanted the New Deal legislation to pass. The Supreme Court kept striking it down. But both parties agreed on the way that our system of government was designed, the way the playing field was laid out. You competed about politics, but you protected the institutions and the foundations. Today, the institutions and the foundations are up for grabs. And once that happens, that's very different than just competing about what kind of coronavirus policy you want or which party might control the House at one time or another. Once you attack the institutions of our system of government, what it provides for us is going to suffer. People ought to read the Declaration of Independence if they haven't done it recently. Why? Because the independence of the judiciary is literally one of the items on the list that caused us to break from Great Britain and to form the United States of America. It's that important. And the independence of the judiciary from the political apparatus, that's what distinguishes the judicial system in the United States from systems all around the world. And that's what's up for grabs here. There is for example, the Supreme Court's had 9 seats since 1869. The Supreme Court decides half as many cases as they did 30 years ago. There's absolutely no rational reason why the number of justices on the Supreme Court has to change, except if you want to take over that court and in very short order change the way the Supreme Court interprets the Constitution. The FDR plan would have added 6 justices to the Supreme Court, and then the Senate would have confirmed them quickly. That's what would happen here. And in no time at all, you'd have an overwhelmingly liberal majority on the Supreme Court. And the only way to keep that from happening is for a majority of senators to say, we're not going to change the Senate. We're going to keep the filibuster. We're going to debate it. And if it doesn't have enough votes, then it's going to fail. But we're not going to radically change the entire system of government just to get a few political decisions out of the Supreme Court.
You're clearly much smarter than me, but someday we'll have a debate on the filibuster. We'll put that aside for a moment and how it's used in the Senate.
The only point there is, though, that nobody can dispute historically, and Robert Byrd, who was the longest-serving senator in American history, said the filibuster is the single most defining feature of the Senate and has been since the beginning of the 19th century. So it is a very grave thing to just kind of flippantly toss that aside for some short-term gains. The consequences of that are very, very serious, and I don't think anybody can dispute that.
Right. Well, no, the history of it, not for dispute. The use of it, we'll put it, again, I really want to have that debate another time because I want to focus on where we are now and the Senate, and important points that you've made about how this would change the relationship between the 3 branches. There are other things that come into play when we talk about the Senate and the Georgia race, of course, which right now, that runoff in January will, I would say, help define the future, certainly 4 years and maybe even more of this country and what can happen with the downline effects from it. But the Senate and this effort to win by the Democrats combines with a number of other things that I think people aren't paying attention to. Other efforts to change the fundamental operation of government at the federal level. Then you look at the state's issue, which is what happens if you make D.C. a state, if they were to have the Senate, and it were to actually make it through. What would happen if Puerto Rico were to become a state, which would shift the Senate battle, if not forever, because nothing's guaranteed forever to be the Democrat control, but for long enough time, it could fundamentally change the structure of how this country works. That concerns me, Thomas.
Well, these are some of the biggest issues. Certainly, there have been important legislative issues, the response to the coronavirus, and all of that. But the issues that you've mentioned are some of the biggest and most fundamental issues that the Congress has ever confronted.
Thanks for watching the Heritage Foundation's YouTube channel. With more than 500,000 members, we are the nation's largest conservative research and education institution. We believe the principles and ideas of the American founding are worth conserving and renewing. Please help us further our mission by subscribing to this channel and sharing our videos with your family and friends.